Join us right now on the Maps for Us hotline. Talk some NFL playoffs, maybe some college football. Brady Quinn, former NFL QB, former Golden Domer, the founder of Third and Goal Foundation. Third and Goal committed to making a difference in the lives of veterans in need. Hey, Brady.
Hey, Junkies. How we doing this morning?
What's up, Brady? Before we get into the college football championship and this weekend and the divisional round of the playoffs, we want your take on Taylor Heinicke because the entire D.C. metro area fell in love with him on Saturday. You're a guy who bounced around in the NFL. You've talked to us before about what it's like to have a coach who believes in you and have an opportunity. What did you see, and what do you see maybe in the future for a guy like Heinicke?
Well, and look, I think he demonstrated some of the skills that you've got to have in order to be a successful quarterback in the NFL, and especially nowadays. You know, his athleticism was something that probably was overlooked a little bit when you go back to that game, and really, the Bucs defense, I don't think they realize what a good athlete he is. But I was more impressed by his beard chugging going back to, I believe it was his XFL days or AAF days.
Yeah.
No, but the reality is he's got the skill set to be a guy that you're going to put within the competition. I don't know that I'm just going to anoint him as the guy based on one game or any game like that. And he has been around the NFL for a little while now. And so, people have had a chance to give him a look and kind of look at him. Maybe it works out in Washington, maybe it doesn't. But either way, I would imagine that they're going to have someone they're going to be bringing in this offseason who they're expecting to be their starter. Is probably not going to be Heinicke.
Brady, you make a good point about his skill set, that he's athletic, he can move around a little bit. It seemed like a dozen years ago or so, everybody wanted that prototypical pocket-type quarterback. Now it's like, if you can't run, if you're not mobile, teams are downgrading you at this point because of the way, Josh Allen has played, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray in Arizona. I mean, these guys are all over the place in the league now. That seems to be the trend now, is people want the mobile quarterback that can throw the ball too, but you better be able to move in 2021 and beyond when you play quarterback, from the looks of it.
Well, what everyone wants is they want, a high-powered offense, offense that can move the football and can score. And, having the ability to affect the defense with your ability to run, especially when you talk about guys like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, who at times are dynamic running. And then they're sometimes leading their team in rushing, like we saw with Baltimore last week. That's a huge difference-making decision as far as how you go about constructing your offense. The reality is it's important because a lot of the quarterbacks that are coming into the NFL now, they don't play from the pocket with any sort of sense of timing and rhythm. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is the ability to anticipate throws. We just don't see that very often. Now, I will say there is one kid coming out, in this year's draft, I should say two, that has showcased that. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, but he's gone at number one, so we don't even need to talk about him. Mac Jones is the other one that, when you watch his tape and you watch his feet and how he moves, his eyes and feet move together through his progressions, just like you would if you're an NFL quarterback. He's the one that's probably like second most NFL ready of all the other guys who are in this crop or in this quarterback class.
Well, I don't want to belabor the Heinicke thing, but the one thing I'll say that jumped out at me is I knew going in this guy was a great athlete because they talked about how in the XFL he would run read option, he would go in for Cam in Carolina a few times and mix it up. What jumped out at me with Heinicke, though, was his ability to see the field. And his coach talking about his college coach said he's the only guy in 32 years that could actually go through 5 progressions. To me, that's a critical factor, and that's what a lot of these guys don't have and why they don't last.
Well, look, if you're going through all 5 progressions in the NFL, you've got one hell of an offensive line, okay?
Right.
In today's game,
well, he said he knocks out really 2 at the line. He knocks out 2 before snap. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem. You sometimes can knock out 2. Really, it's after the snap, right? At the snap of the football, you're confirming what you saw pre-snap and your post-snap as you're dropping back. You're confirming that it is what you thought it was going to be. Then at that point, you can start kind of eliminating, different receivers based on leverage. But no, look, it's a great compliment to him. Again, I'm more the type that, even with, I'm trying to think of some of the other quarterbacks we've seen early on that were first-round picks, for example. Whether it's Josh Allen, everyone was a naysayer his rookie year. I've always been a fan of his. I always thought he'd be able to do what he's done this year. Baker Mayfield, everyone wrote him off last year, but he had a great rookie year. Like, we, for whatever reason, feel like we have to have a hot take or make an opinion on a guy after one season or one game. I'm just not that guy. So, look.
What's your take on Haskins?
Well, Haskins needs to play more football too, though.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up on Dwayne Haskins. I've said this all along. if you put that kid in a T-shirt and shorts and you pick any other quarterback that you want and you tell him to go out and have a throwing competition, he will compete as good as anyone. Now, what happens once you put on the helmet, the pads, and put him on the field with an offense and everything else out around him? That's a little bit of a different story, as far as the processing and all that. But that's something that takes time and takes reps. There's no replication for experience at the quarterback position. And for a guy who only started 1 year at Ohio State, got better and better and better, didn't play a ton as a rookie, but then had to change systems and then got thrown into another thing, and I'm talking strictly on the field. What he did off the field was immature and was stupid, selfish as well. And that's part of the issue. That's really the issue why he's not there, is his play level on the field wasn't good enough to be able to overcome the issues that he was, off the field, and the fact that he wasn't being the leader that he should have been. So that's why he's not there. If he was a Pro Bowl caliber player, they'd put up with some of that stuff. Come on, guy. I mean, we know how the NFL works.
Yeah.
But he'll get an opportunity somewhere else. I don't know. He's more of your prototypical pocket passer. And that's unfortunately a tough spot to be in as a quarterback entering the NFL nowadays.
Tough question for you, though, Brady, here. But if you're the Skins GM and they're picking at 19 and Mac Jones is still on the board, they got a lot of other needs, but they need a quarterback. Do you like Mac Jones at 19, or would you pick another player, or a stud receiver, and kick the tires on another quarterback, or maybe go in another direction and go after a veteran? Let's just throw out a name like Matt Stafford, or would you start from scratch and go after a young kid like Mac Jones?
I would probably go after a veteran, and reason being is, one, it's kind of worked with Alex Smith, obviously, but before he got hurt, and even with Alex when he came back. I mean, what a story, by the way, that's been. But I would probably go the veteran route, and for the reason is this roster does need a lot more help, and I think you put Mac Jones in that position, and he's coming from a team that had a Heisman Trophy winner wide receiver, potentially the better wide receiver, Waddle, who was hurt. Who we saw a little bit limping around, still looked like he could run a 4.4 with a limp. And then he had the best offensive line, the best running back in the country. It's like he's not walking in that scenario, and he doesn't have that dynamic ability running the football to overcome what they don't have. So I think he would almost be kind of set up to fail a little bit. And so I'd rather see him go somewhere else. I'd rather see the Washington football team do something else, go with best player available at that point, or depending on need. And then also look at, bringing in a veteran, whether that's Matt Stafford, as you had mentioned, or whoever else is going to be out there, right? There's always rumors about, where Deshaun Watson could be going, or, where other teams might be drafting guys in the first round, moving on from their veterans.
Talking to Brady Quinn, NFL and college football analyst. I saw your defense of Notre Dame, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about it. No, because I think a couple of us had a similar defense that, people are crushing Notre Dame because, let's be honest, they've come up short several times in the college football playoffs, but every team is getting smashed by Alabama and Clemson. I mean, that's what happens.
Right, and then I think there's a great divide right now in college football. And I'm not acting like I have the answers. I have some ideas that I think could help. But when you look at Alabama and how they drummed Ohio State, who, by the way, is recruited at a similar level to Alabama, part of the reason is just Alabama's just been that much better. So it's kind of Clemson. I mean, that's their 6th national championship in 12 years. Nick Saban's doing something right down there. But it wasn't so much a defense. It was more of just kind of pointing out to all the idiots that want to make a hot take at Notre Dame. And I'm going, wait a second. The last 2 times they've gotten in the college football playoff, they've lost to the team that went on to be the national champion. And they actually lost by less than the team that lost to them in the national championship. It's but everyone just writes it off. And the best is you hear it most from the other blue bloods who aren't even competitive, like the Michigan, the USC. I work with a couple of USC guys who, once they stopped paying players at USC, look what happened to that program. So, the reality is this: no one's really competing at the level those programs are. But Notre Dame actually is starting to get closer, and no one's going to recognize this, but they lost by 17. They got a BS call of an illegal shift, I believe, that took away one of the touchdowns. It actually could have been a lot closer. If they would have kept that touchdown, it would have been a 14-10 margin in the second half. So I was pointing out the fact that maybe Notre Dame was a lot better than people gave them credit this year. But no one wants to admit that because they're Notre Dame, and you either love them or hate them. There's really no in between.
You know what they need to do? Just think of this as you say this. They need to do like what the World Cup does and have like a third place game. So the teams that lose can play against each other, and then you can rail maybe on the team that finishes in fourth.
Right, and the problem is it would have been Notre Dame Clemson again for a third time. Like, all right, like I'd have rather them actually played like A&M or Ohio State because like there's so many questions about whether or not Ohio State deserved to be in there after Notre Dame lost the ACC championship game. You're like, all right, some people didn't know if they deserved. A&M kept making a case even though they got trumped by Alabama worse than Notre Dame did. Again, another team that falls in that category. So I don't know, but I would say this: like college football needs to really rethink how they're going about the playoff system. Because if they become more inclusive and it goes to 8 or 16 teams, I do think that's something that other schools can use as a recruiting pitch to these 5-star, 4-star players out of high school or kids who are in the transfer portal, which they're going to change the rules for the transfer portal where you can leave at any point in time. You don't have to be a grad transfer. You don't have to necessarily have a reason where something happened in the past where you want to move on from that school. And so if that's the case, if you open it up to 16, now you've got other schools that are saying, look, we've won. We played for national championship in the playoff too. Or maybe you have that Cinderella story for a smaller school brand. And I know you're going to laugh, but I'm not saying Coastal Carolina is going to be able to beat Alabama, 10 times out of 10. But maybe once out of 10, they get Bama on an off day and Coastal Carolina hangs around. They have, one of those dream seasons. I mean, look at Gonzaga. That's how Gonzaga was built. They used to be a Cinderella story. Now they might be the best in college basketball this year. So I'm just saying I think if they were more inclusive with the playoff, and it's not hard to do, they could easily, especially with 8. You literally would take all the New Year's 6, you convert those into your quarterfinal, semifinal games, and your national championship game, which is already brokered off, would already be there. So I just think the more teams you make as a part of this, the better chance you have of someone else besides Bama or Clemson hoisting up that national championship trophy, and probably because there's more parity amongst the teams and recruiting and some of the talent that they have on these rosters.
All right, so switching to the NFL, what's the most intriguing game to you? And give me a game where you think you could see a blowout.
That's a betting angle question, by the way, if you didn't catch that.
Yeah, Brady, you know
right.
that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, the spread is – I'll just put it this way. The spread in the Kansas City-Cleveland game, I think it's like 10, somewhere in that ballpark, 10, maybe 9. That's a lot of points for a playoff game. I traditionally would say – and look, I'm not biased. I'm a former Brown and grew up rooting for the Browns, but that's a lot of points. Like I would say take the points with Cleveland on that one, but something tells me I'm kind of scared off on the line. I like the under in that particular over-under, which I think is set at like 52 or something like that, or maybe 54, somewhere in that ballpark.
56
I like that better. 56.5 now. So I would take that under as opposed to, even the spread on that particular game.
Okay.
But the game that most intrigues me is Baltimore-Buffalo. Because I look at that and I'm like, well, you've got two quarterbacks, one of which, basically has had to carry this offense. They haven't really run the football effectively in Buffalo. We know Baltimore can with Lamar Jackson. They're stable at running backs, but then it's like, can he throw well enough? So it's just intriguing from like which quarterback, which offense, which team will show up and play better. And then if you're looking at the two defenses, I think you got to give the edge to Baltimore. And that's not a good matchup for Buffalo, by the way. When you look at the strength of the Baltimore Ravens, their edge rushers, their cornerback play, how they match up, I think it's going to be a great game. I would not be shocked if Baltimore then pull off the upset. A team that, we didn't know if could win a playoff game, now ends up finding itself in the AFC Championship game with a guy who's a former league MVP at the quarterback spot. So that game's the most intriguing to me.
And then what about Brady against Breeze for the third time? Well, I guess it wasn't Breeze all 3 times, but Brady,
and that's but we saw the results of the game, and I kind of wonder if it's just a bad matchup for the Bucs. I'm wondering if this is almost like last year with the 49ers and the Packers, where, Green Bay was 13-3 last year. They weren't overly impressive, but they just got shellacked by the 49ers every single time they played them. And my thing was, sometimes you have a bad personnel matchup, and teams just don't match up on paper, and you try to overcome that with the way you go about the scheme. It could be how you're trying to protect things up for your quarterback or protect the offensive line if there's some weak spots or maybe a certain defender that's not good in coverage. But there's only so much you can do. I'm wondering if that's the case with the Bucs and just the way this offense operates. And the other thing I'm concerned is they can run the football effectively. Like, they've got the backs to do it, the offensive line to do it. Bruce Arians just seems reluctant to want to run the football as much as they probably should. And when you look at some of the teams that are most successful in the playoffs, the defense always has to step up. They have to show the ability to run the football, and I'm not sure he's going to want to do that. So I kind of look at it and just wonder if it's a bad matchup and if Bruce Arians could end up being ultimately the downfall of the Bucs just for him forcing them to be a one-dimensional team when they don't have to be.
Actually, that's my mistake. Breeze did play in those two regular seasons. That was before he got hurt. So it was Breeze in both of those wins. Two blowouts,
both,
too.
I mean, both of them, they're both blowouts. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, third time around, you would expect that it plays to the Bucs' advantage. They should be able to learn more from their losses and kind of figure out what to do differently this time. But like I said, if they don't have some sort of a semblance of a rushing attack versus those edge rushers and the way that front can rush, then it's not going to matter. Like, they can try throwing all they want. Chris Godwin struggled catching the football last week. So, Tom Brady's playing at a much higher level, I think, at this point in his career than Drew Brees, given their age. But, ultimately, he can only do so much. And that's where I become more concerned about between the two play callers in this game. I think Sean Payton is more willing to do whatever it takes to win, where I think Bruce Arians wants to just chuck the football around the field, and then he wants that to be the way that they go about beating the Saints.
When's your boy Urban Meyer going to be named head coach of Jacksonville?
It's funny.
I know you know something.
Well, what's funny about it, my conversations I've had with him is I think if this year would have been different, as far as broadcasting goes, like if there would have been crowds, if we would have had the same environment that we had our first year where you've got thousands of people around us. I know it sounds crazy to people, but I do think that played a little bit of a role in like what this year was in broadcasting and looking forward, not knowing when that's going to get back to, the old way of games being filled with thousands of people. And I think this is a great opportunity. Like, I think it's kind of twofold, like what he's doing now and what he could be doing. And the Jaguars with their cap space, with the ability to have Trevor Lawrence, 2 first-round draft picks, a team that has some good pieces already, and he's an owner that he knows well and is friendly with, and especially if he gets compensated what he can get compensated. He's young enough to give this thing a run. So I wouldn't blame him whatsoever for taking this opportunity because I think it's a great opportunity.
It would be a big bag of money. I know that. Big one.
Yep.
Brady,
Absolutely.
always love having you on. It's Brady Quinn, former NFL QB, founder of the Third and Goal Foundation. Do support it. Third and Goal, amazing organization committed to making a difference in the lives of veterans in need. Thanks, pal.
Thank you, Brady.
Thank you, Brady.
Appreciate it.
Everyone, guys.
All right,
buddy.